Ever get that feeling like someone's watching you? I mean, really watching you.
Yeah, I think we've all been there.
Right. Well, today we're diving deep into a story about a guy who was not only being watched, but was the watcher, Robert Hansen, an FBI agent who was secretly selling secrets to the Soviets for decades.
Wow.
And the crazy thing is, even when investigators were convinced they had a mole, they just kept overlooking him
They missed him completely.
completely. We've got excerpts from this podcast, American Scandal, all about this case. So get ready for a wild ride because we're going deep into Cold War paranoia, double agents.
Sounds intense.
Oh, it is. We're talking about the shocking unraveling of a man driven by some seriously dark impulses.
This Robert Hansen.
Yeah. So the podcast starts with this scene, right? It's 1991, and Hansen is confessing all his spying sins to a priest.
To a priest. Wow, that's a curveball.
Right. He's already been living this double life for over a decade at this point. He's torn, wants to be a good Catholic, a family man, but he's got this, like, compulsion to betray his country.
It's almost like he's compartmentalizing those parts of his life.
It really is. Now, you'd think the FBI and CIA would be on the same page when it comes to mole hunting,
I'd
right?
assume so, yeah.
But these podcast excerpts, they tell a different story.
Oh, how so?
Well, their early investigations, they were full of distrust and rivalry between the agencies.
So they weren't exactly playing nicely together.
Not at all.
Yeah.
They were so focused on finding a mole in the CIA that they totally missed Hansen, who was right there in the FBI the whole time.
Unbelievable.
It's crazy. I mean, it's like looking for your keys in the wrong room.
Exactly.
And because of that tunnel vision, Hansen, he was able to operate undetected for years.
Wow, that's a long time.
It is. But then comes along this agent, Tim Caruso. He's practically a lone wolf in the FBI, and he starts thinking outside the box. This guy, picture this, he creates this massive timeline covering his entire office wall, tracking potential suspects within the FBI.
He sounds dedicated.
Oh, incredibly so. He recognized that this mole, this could be anyone, even someone seemingly above suspicion.
Smart thinking.
But while Caruso is meticulously building his case, Hansen isn't exactly lying low,
He wasn't. What was he
He
doing?
gets into a physical fight with a coworker, actually drags her down a hallway.
Seriously.
Yeah, makes you wonder if it was the pressure getting to him, maybe some subconscious cry for help.
Could be. But he didn't face any consequences for that.
None. It's like that old saying, right? The best place to hide a tree is in a forest.
Makes sense.
But then there's this almost comical incident in a parking garage. He tries to reconnect with Russian intelligence, practically shoving a file at a GRU officer.
The GRU.
Yeah, that's Russian military intelligence.
Oh, okay.
Not exactly known for being subtle.
Right.
And Hansen's move, it seems so amateurish, almost like he wanted to get caught.
That is strange. So was he just reckless or...
It's hard to say for sure. Maybe a lapse in judgment, maybe a cry for attention, or maybe he just underestimated the GRU's surveillance. Yeah, who knows? But one thing's clear. Hansen's actions are getting more and more erratic.
And what about the FBI and CIA? Were they getting any closer to finding him?
So they actually think they found their guy, but it's not Hansen. They arrest this CIA officer, Aldrich Ames. Turns out he had some suspicious financial dealings.
Follow the money, right.
Exactly. But even after Ames is arrested in '94, this agent Caruso, he's not convinced. He kept pointing to all these inconsistencies, cases that Ames just couldn't have been responsible for.
Like what?
Well, there was this case, the Felix Blocked case, the voice on the intercepted call. It didn't match Ames at all.
Oh, wow. So even with Ames behind bars, they knew there was still someone else out there.
Right. And that's when their focus shifts to this other CIA officer, Brian Kelly.
Brian Kelly.
They put him under surveillance, search his house, tap his phone, the works.
Intense.
They even found a map in Kelly's house. And they thought it marked dead drop locations. You know those secret spots where spies leave information for each other?
I've heard of those, yeah.
But guess what?
What?
The map, it was just for Kelly's jogging writs.
Oh, no. A classic case of mistaken identity.
Totally. They were so determined to find the mole that they were seeing patterns where none existed.
That's wild.
And here's the kicker. Get this. Hansen lived in the same area as Kelly and used the same park for his actual dead drops.
You're kidding. So they were right there, but totally missed him.
Right under their noses. Can you imagine what Hansen must have been thinking during all of this?
I can't even imagine.
Probably sweating bullets.
Mm.
But instead of laying low, his behavior takes an even darker turn.
What did he do?
He starts posting these explicit stories online, detailing how he secretly records himself and his wife. And get this, he uses their real names.
No way. It's like he wanted to get caught.
I know, right? This level of recklessness is mind-boggling.
It really is. So where does it go from here? It's like they had all these puzzle pieces but couldn't figure out how they fit together.
They had the letters, the recording. Did they even start?
Well, that's where Bob King comes in. He's this seasoned counterintelligence agent.
So he's the one who finally cracks the case.
He's a big part of it, yeah. As he's going through the letters, this tiny detail pops out at him.
What, like some secret code word?
Not a code word exactly, but a quote. A really disturbing one, actually, from General Patton.
Oh, yeah, Patton. He was known for being a little rough around the edges.
Yeah, definitely not known for his sensitivity. The quote itself used a racial slur.
I see. And Hansen used this quote.
Yeah, in one of the letters.
Yeah.
And it was so specific, most people wouldn't even know Patton said it.
So it was like a fingerprint, almost.
Exactly. And for King, it triggered this memory. He'd worked with Hansen years before and remembered him using that same quote.
No way. What are the chances?
Seriously. So suddenly, after years of dead ends, King has this real lead. But it was still just a hunch, not enough to arrest him.
Right, they needed more. They had to connect Hansen to the mole, definitively.
Exactly. And King, he finds it buried in those letters.
What'd he find?
All these references to Chicago.
Hansen's hometown, right?
Bingo. And then there was the mole's code name. B. King realized it could just stand for Bob.
Short for Robert. I mean, it seems so obvious in hindsight.
It does, doesn't it? It just shows how, even in a world of spies, people leave these little traces.
Are creatures of habit.
Yeah, and those habits, they can betray us even when we try so hard to hide.
So King puts it all together. He figures out it's Hansen. What happens next? Do they, storm his office, guns blazing?
Not quite. They had to be careful. They'd been wrong before. Remember Brian Kelly?
Right, right.
And this time, they were dealing with someone high up in the FBI.
I see. So they had to tread lightly.
They needed undeniable proof, something to catch him in the act.
They had to set a trap.
Exactly. But how do you catch a master spy who's avoided capture for decades?
Good question. They had to get inside his head.
They did. They knew Hansen was driven by greed, ego, this need to prove how smart he was.
So they played to those weaknesses.
They did. They came up with a plan to exploit his weaknesses.
Okay, now I'm really curious. What did they do?
First, they had to give Hansen a reason to reach out. He'd been quiet for a while, so they planted a fake opportunity.
Something he wouldn't be able to resist.
Exactly. They fabricated a whole top-secret program, code name, the works.
Wow, they really went all out.
They did, and they made sure Hansen would stumble upon information about it, but made it look accidental.
Like he wasn't supposed to see it, so it was even more tempting.
Right. They were playing to his ego, his desire to be in the know.
That's so clever.
And they were counting on his arrogance, that compulsion to prove himself to the Russians.
So did he take the bait?
Hook, line, and sinker.
He couldn't resist.
He reached out to his handlers, arranged a dead drop.
Wait, don't leave me hanging. What happened at the dead drop?
You'll have to wait for part 3 for that. But I can tell you, the FBI had their trap set, and Hansen's time was running out.
All right, so the trap is set, the bait is taken, and Hansen's heading to the dead drop. Where did this all go down?
A park. Vienna, Virginia. Not far from Hansen's house, actually.
And I bet they had the whole place locked down, right?
Yeah.
Surveillance teams, cameras, the works.
Absolutely. They wanted this to be airtight. No room for error.
I can only imagine the tension, waiting to see if he'd show.
It must have been intense. But everything went exactly to plan.
So Hansen walks right into their trap.
He does. Cold February night in 2001. Shows up at the park, follows the instructions, places the package under a footbridge.
Just like he's done 100 times before.
Exactly, relying on all his tricks, all his tradecraft. But this time, the FBI, they were one step ahead.
It's almost like poetic justice, you know? This guy who outsmarted everyone for decades finally gets outsmarted himself.
I'd say so. As soon as Hansen leaves the park, the FBI, they swoop in, get the package, confirm it's the real deal.
So they have him, right? Why not arrest him right there?
They wanted to be smart about it. Avoid a scene, a chase, maybe even a shootout. Hansen was still an FBI agent, remember?
Right. Armed and dangerous?
Plus, they wanted to protect their sources, their methods.
Didn't want to tip off the Russians.
Exactly. Keep them in the dark a little longer, disrupt their operations.
So Hansen goes home, thinking he's in the clear. What happens next?
Later that night, FBI, they surround his house. He opens the door, and bam, there they are.
I bet that was a shock. People he worked with, some for years.
Yeah. Imagine the look on his face. Betrayal, confusion.
Did he even try to deny it?
No point. They had him dead to rights. Evidence was overwhelming. Game over.
Arrested right there on his doorstep.
Without incident. Charged with espionage. End of an era.
And after all this, we still don't know why. Why would he risk it all?
That's the big question, isn't it? The podcast, it explores a lot of angles. Greed, ideology, power, even thrill-seeking.
It's hard to wrap your head around. He had it all. Family, house, a good career. Why throw it all away?
Espionage, it's a strange world. Logic goes out the window. People driven by forces they don't even understand themselves.
The damage he caused, it must have been huge.
Lives were put at risk, sources compromised, secrets leaked, repercussions were felt for years.
It's scary to think about. So what happened to Hansen in the end?
He made a deal, cooperated with the government, avoided the death penalty, life in prison, no parole.
A fitting end for a life lived in the shadows.
The Hansen case, it's a powerful reminder, Betrayal can come from anywhere. The people you trust the most, it makes you think.
It really does. Like, who else is out there living a double life? Chilling thought.
This has been a fascinating dive into the mind of a mole, the world of spies, the price of betrayal. Lots to think about.
If you enjoyed this deep dive, be sure to subscribe for more stories from history, science, culture. We'll be back soon with another episode, guaranteed to make you think, question, maybe even look over your shoulder a little more often. Until then, stay curious.